Good morning, dear friends. My name is Annika Rembe. I'm Consul General here. I'm Consul General of Sweden here in New York, and it's a true pleasure to welcome Volumental. If you haven't tried, try. I understood much more about my feet. And I guess you will try to explain a little more about the combination of AI and retail and fashion maybe. And it's quite interesting how we can find perfect shoes with your AI-powered fit engine, because that's what it's called. So in addition to that, I'm really looking forward to hearing a panel on the future of retail, the transformation in retail. We all see what's going on, either from our website or when we walk around in the city. And I do think that is also very, very interesting to follow. Now, with no further ado, I will leave the floor to Anna Malkan Ultvedt, or Ultvedt Malkan? Either way. Who is the Vice President of Sales at Monumental. Please.
Thank you so much, Annika, and thank you so much for hosting us here today. It is a truly magnificent building. So thank you everyone for coming. I'll give a very brief intro to Volumental, and then we'll dive right into the panel after an introduction of the panelists. So I think all of you have some basic familiarity with Volumental. We are a Swedish 3D technology company that is looking to transform the way we buy, sell, and produce footwear. And to really ensure that consumers have the best journey along the way. Since launching the Volumental solution 2.5 years ago, we've scanned over 2 million people in 35 countries around the world. And that number is growing very rapidly. I think last month we scanned 270,000 customers. So that's very exciting. Today we're focusing on building out our product across the customer journey. And really ensuring that what happens in the store also translates to other parts of the customer experience, so that you can take that data, use it in an online environment, and really bridge the gap between the physical and the digital, which is what we're here to discuss today. So the topic of today's panel is Omni-Channel, the key to saving traditional retail, ? That's important to note there. We don't know yet what's going to happen, right? So I thought I'd say just a couple of facts about Omni-Channel and what's happening. A Harvard Business Review article recently mentioned a study in which 46,000 customers were surveyed on how they shop. And they found that 20% of those customers shopped from a single retailer only in the in-store, physical brick-and-mortar store. 7% shopped only online, and 73% shopped across multiple channels. And what I thought was really interesting was that the more channels a customer used, the more profitable they were. So what they saw was that the customers who shopped in an omni-channel setting, so in multiple channels, spent an average of 4% more in-store and 10% more online. So they were also more profitable per individual channel. And the more channels you used, the more you spent. So it's clear that having an integrated omni-channel strategy is very important for retailers today. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce our 4 esteemed panelists that we have joining us today. So let me start with Tony King. Tony is the CEO and creative director at King & Partners. He formerly led e-commerce strategy for the Gucci Group and helped build up several of their e-commerce sites. Secondly, not going in any particular order here, we have Jason Jabu from Fleet Feet. He's the director of e-commerce, and Fleet Feet, one of our big customers, has been growing their e-commerce strategy significantly over the last couple of years, and that's growth spearheaded by Jason. We're also joined by Steve McDermott, who is the head of industry for retail at Google, based here in New York City, and ensuring that Google can advise clients on retail strategy moving forward. And finally, Gadi Ben-Mark, who is an expert and associate principal at McKinsey, also working with retail and social media and e-commerce strategy advising. So I think we have the opportunity to have a really great panel here today. To start things off, I thought just a really short question. Through which channel did you buy your last pair of shoes? So there's a...
In a retail store.
Was it a Fleet Feet one?
Actually, the last pair of shoes I bought wasn't Fleet Feet, but before that, the last pair of shoes I bought was in New York City at the Allbirds location.
Okay.
So,
Mine was from NewBalance.com.
Mine was from a website, but it was a brand I visited before to check out the shoes before.
Mine was on johnsonmurphys.com. The shoes didn't fit. And there was a page there that says that to return you need to take to the nearest FedEx office. So I took it to the nearest FedEx office, and then it turns out that the label that they had there, the return label, was a UPS label.
Oh, sounds like a smooth experience. Actually, I also saw a study that said that retailers are losing $24 billion a year on poor mobile experiences when people are just abandoning their carts. So you went through the process, but still had a negative experience. Right. Okay. So the first question I wanted to direct first to Jason. An omni-channel experience allows the customer journey to start both in-store and online, and possibly even from other channels. How do you see omni-channel changing the traditional customer journey?
I think I've heard this term digital influence factor, right? And you were alluding to it in your opening. Most transactions now are starting at some point online, right? Google talks about micro moments. I want to go, I want to know, I want to buy. Anybody have their washing machine break or something happen and you're trying to Google what to do to fix it? And so I think most journeys are going to start online. They are now, we're seeing it in retail, which means it's incumbent on the retailer to make sure that we're prepared when they come in. We know we're kind of working on that journey to get them in. I'll tell a very brief story, not a Fleet Feet story, but my wife loves anthropology. So I don't know if you guys can relate to that. But I signed up for an anthropology email a couple years ago, and one day, it was holiday shopping season, I got an email and it had this beautiful brown sweater with a big fox on it, right? And I was like, oh, Trish is gonna love this thing. And so I clicked on it, and then I didn't buy it online because I thought I'd go to the store and check out other stuff. And this fox sweater followed me around, right? Facebook ads, right? It's everywhere for a month. By the time I finally went to the store to buy it, it was Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. That's on me, not their fault. And they didn't have it. Right? And they actually gave me horrible service. They were not even nice to me. I would have bought bedding, right? I'm a guy Christmas Eve shopping for his wife, nothing. And so I leave empty-handed, I'm upset. Then I go to a local retailer, right? 20 minutes to close, and they treat me like royalty, right? Curated selection, right? Great service. And I'm like, man, this was great. I got a bunch of stuff for my wife, everything worked out. 6 months later, I'm thinking about the story. I'd shopped in Anthropology 3 more times, and I'd been to that local retailer 1 other time. And I was like, what's the difference, right? The only difference was that Anthropology is really good about staying in touch with me and making sure that I'm in that ecosystem that they built, and the local retailer couldn't do it. And so I use that story a lot to think about how we're engaging with the consumer, because we can offer great service, but great retailers are going out of business too, and we have to be smart about it.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else want to chime in on that topic? Or?
I think you raise a really interesting point, and it's not so much about the channel, because when you think about it, we're online all the time, so you have to assume that digital connectivity is ambient at this point. Smartphones are fully penetrated into developed world, so just assume that everybody is online all the time. So more likely than not, there's going to be a digital touch point that triggers a purchase behavior, but it really comes down to the shopper. And if you're solving for what he's looking for, if you have a brand that you're excited about, if you have an on-trend assortment that has the type of products that you want, and you have that experience, and not so much the fun, uplifting experience, that's great, that's a nice add-on, but more of the basics to help somebody get through the checkout process, get them in and out of the store to accomplish their task. That's more valuable than that extra fun experience. So I think with the customer at the center, those 3 things are the elements that can become an omni-channel retailer's best friend.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that. I think sometimes when brands hear the word Omnichannel, they get terrified and think it's a multi-million-dollar investment in software. But actually, I think the most important thing is well-trained staff. I think that's how you enable a good omnichannel strategy, giving your staff access to the right data and have them be your brand accelerators and the people that are going to help your consumers fall in love with the product you've got.
I think that's what Fleet Feet have also done so well with like using something like our solution to give the staff the tools to really drive the experience for the customer as well.
I think the basics you guys are talking about, that's exactly right, but it's getting increasingly difficult because the bar keeps rising. Right, in your experience, Jason, they would have had to know that, okay, you're looking for that sweater and this is where you live. So here are the stores in your area that carry it. Here are the stores in your area that carry it right now. Recognize that you're approaching one of them, through a GPS signal, and have a store associate, welcome you with the sweater. Technology is there, it's doable, but it's very difficult to get right.
Actually, that kind of transitions into one of my last questions, which was, now that we have all this data, how do we use it in a way that doesn't become creepy or uncomfortable? Because I don't know how Jason would have felt about if someone stood there at the door holding the sweater. So I guess that's okay. And how do we do that in a good way so that it actually becomes a positive experience and not Uber when they launched?
Yeah, I think that can be obtrusive and creepy. I think the first half of what you're talking about is really valid, though. I recently went to Target.com. I was trying to find some chairs, and I was going to buy them online, and then I saw on the actual product detail page, these chairs are available at these 3 stores really close to you, how far they are, opening hours, phone number. That's incredibly useful.
Yep.
Of course, I would have loved someone to know I was looking for the chairs as soon as I walked through the door, but that's probably not happening anytime soon. I know it's technically possible, but yeah.
I think a lot of this comes back down to the basics, like we're kind of talking about, like get the basics right. So yeah, it is creepy, right? Like I find myself going, in incognito mode on my computer to look for things because I just don't want the ads following me around, right? Or I don't want my digital profile to sort of reflect this thing that I'm looking for my kid, Pokemon cards or whatever it is. And I think consumers are becoming more and more aware of that, and so they're being sensitive to how they're shopping and how they're browsing. But when the value proposition is there, so like Anna said, like we're working with Volumental, and we've scanned almost 1 million feet in the last 16 or 18 months. And so how do we take that data that will apply? We've got all this great information, right, to say, hey, your foot, right, your arch height, right, you're in the 20th percentile, right, like your arches are really, really low compared to the general population. That information is really useful for the consumer, especially when we can start to build custom products for that individual. And so if you're a Fleet Feet customer and we can keep in touch with you with that information, that's really beneficial. And so I think it's being true to your brand and being smart about the things that you're sharing with the consumer, but trying not to be creepy. I will say, one of the things that I'm working on really hard right now is how do we connect our digital marketing and our e-commerce initiative and everything that goes around it and tie back to the retail store, right? The best expression of the Fleet Feet brand is going to be in store, face-to-face with a sales associate. And so we're trying to tie that back, but it's really hard to measure and track a digital ad impression back to an in-store sale. And so we are doing things. We're tying, our CRM data and trying to, we're working with match partners to try to understand what's going on there. And I think that even ventures into this creepy territory, but it helps us validate the strategy and have confidence to continually invest in the right areas to grow. So I think it's necessary, but I also think, it is a sensitive topic.
We just recently...
We'll save the Google of you for last.
We very recently ran a consumer survey here in the US on trying to kind of find the borderline between creepy and helpful. And the way we position it is, here's a bunch of surprise and delight moments, rank them on which ones you like, and here's how we collected how the retailer collected the data to deliver these delightful moments. Rank them on are you comfortable, are you uncomfortable? And surprisingly, what we found out is that on the one hand, consumers expect you to remember them, right? So if they've given you your size, right, they want you to remember that consistently and show them only products that match them and not to have to enter the same information twice, even if it's a year apart. On the other hand, we find that when it comes to what consumers are comfortable with versus uncomfortable with, if you're monitoring my every move online, all the sites that I visit, certainly my clickstream through your site, if you're monitoring all of my searches on your site or even on Google, people are perfectly comfortable, and it doesn't vary very much by demographics. But if you're trying to read my email in an anonymized way, or if you're using face recognition techniques on me when I'm walking around or walking in the store, almost all demographics don't view this favorably. And to us, it was surprising because monitoring your every move online, right? Or your searches, there's so much that you can decipher about a consumer, and yet people seem to be accepting.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's about setting expectations and that trade-off between privacy and what's useful and then what crosses that line. So yes, for shopping for clothes, it would be great if a retailer remembered my sizes, remembered last time I bought a white shirt, my payment information in a safe and secure way. But then when it does cross over, I think that's the thing. And if it is email, if it's how many times have people had a conversation and then you get an ad for something based on something that you've said verbally. Although, companies will deny that happens, it's a strange phenomenon, and it definitely scares people. But I think it's that trade-off. Where am I getting value from having a retailer understand my behavior online? And I think there's an implicit understanding when I'm logging on to, no one logs on anymore, we're always logged on. But when you go online and you start browsing, there's an implicit understanding that this information is going to be used to, get me to do something that a vendor wants, that a retailer wants. So I think we are okay with that. It is a fine line, but I think as long as everybody understands what that agreement is, and it's opt-in, and you can opt out if you feel uncomfortable with it, then I think the foundation is there for people to feel really good about shopping online.
Yep, definitely. There are a couple of obvious channels that we associate with Omni, right? We have mobile apps, social media, and online shopping. But what do you think are the channels that could become more mainstream in the next couple of years that aren't now? Are there new channels popping up?
I think Instagram is still not shoppable. It doesn't. I mean, I love Instagram. I don't want it to be shoppable, but I can't see how that's not going to happen. Right now, there's a bit of a gap where I see so many products I like on Instagram, and then you have to research to get the exact product and find out where it is. So that jump is going to become shorter, I believe.
Yep.
For low consideration items, we see the rise of conversational channels. Facebook Messenger, Alexa, Google Home. Just get me a toothpaste, so I need new Tide. Certainly not in high consideration apparel purchases yet.
I heard, so in Sweden we still don't have Amazon fully launched, but I heard that now you can, like when you're watching things on Amazon, you can see the products that are for sale or like you can hover over a product and get a link to it. I guess is also an interesting one that you can start using moving media this way. Yeah, so actually another question that I think is super interesting and that we think a lot about is how can traditional retailers coexist alongside platforms? So there's been obviously there's a large rise among platform players like Amazon, Alibaba, and then simultaneously we see all the more traditional retailers building out their omni-channel capabilities. And then you have brands, right, like Nike, that sell through their own brick and mortar stores, their own e-commerce, other people's brick and mortar stores, other people's e-commerce, as well as through platforms. What are your thoughts on how this will develop and how brands and retailers versus platforms will coexist?
Yeah, well, I see platforms as the new retailers because all the brands we work with have to have a strategy. What do you sell on your own channels? What do you sell on to other department stores? And really the department store strategies are becoming less important. There's less margin now, and it's really about using things like Amazon instead. So it's about having a good strategy and making sure that on your brand site and in your brand stores you have a reason to come there, that you need to become a destination. So you need to have good content, exclusive products, products before anyone else. There needs to be a reason to come to the brand.
Two observations. The first one about Nike, I think they did it in a very clever way, along the lines of what you're saying, Tony. The latest and greatest collection and the most high-end, that's on Nike.com and the Nike store. The mid-market, not as new, you can find on retailer.com. And the mass market, certainly last year's stuff on Amazon. And the lines of delineation are very clear, and so customers who pay premium on Nike.com, they feel that they get value for it. The second observation is that we see a very strong call to action on omni-channel retailers to make sure that every channel adds value to the customer and maintains the economics for the business. I think there's remarkable turnaround stories of companies like the Home Depot, right? That, it used to be you would go into the light bulb aisle and there would be, thousands of products, stuck like in a warehouse. Nowadays, all the long tail is online, and in the store you see products that customers really want to touch and feel without all the sizes and all the permutations of a product. You also see stores like Target that completely redid, for example, the furniture departments. We can go in, it's lit up beautifully. You kind of get the feel for what it would look like in your home. But if you want, other sizes and other colors and other fabrics, that's all moved online.
And you asked about platforms becoming the next retailers. I think retailers are going to become even more and more protective of what's theirs, which is their brand, their margins, and then their customers. And very eloquently said in terms of how Nike used their long tail of their inventory to have a distribution channel with Amazon, but protecting the top end of their merchandise. But I think that's where you can differentiate between maybe a need and a want, those types of products where somebody like an Amazon or a Facebook or a voice assistant, you might be willing to do something that's merely transactional, but you want to, when it's a higher consideration purpose, you tap into the equity that a retailer has. And if it is with their associates, if it's with their history, if it's a brand that makes you feel a certain way, that's where I think their future lies, in providing that something that's really, really unique value that only they can provide based on how they've built their business.
Jason, maybe just provide the retailer perspective here.
Yeah. So obviously, like the brands that are the manufacturers, like a Nike or a New Balance or any brand, I've noticed there's two distinct strategies there. Some brands, they actually are very protective over their products, right? They don't want to be commoditized, right? So they'll actually withhold or really sort of keep products off of some of these platforms or limit which ones go on the platforms, like Amazon, intentionally, until it reaches a certain threshold, a certain point where they're like, hey, the only way we're going to keep growing is to go on these platforms. And the other strategy is you go where the people go. You go where the people are. The people they're starting searches on Amazon, right? I know all my kids, that's what they do. That's where they go. They take daddy's phone and they go straight to Amazon to look for things. So, as a retailer, our challenge is that, we're a retailer, but we're a brand as well. And so my concern is always, what does our brand look like on one of these platforms, right? Because essentially we're a distributor within the platform, not a brand on the platform. Anecdotally, we've had some interesting things because we are, on Amazon for a couple brands and products that we sell. And we've actually had customers who purchase something and on Amazon come into a retail store, a Fleet Feet retail store, to try to return the product. Try to figure that out, right? Like they're trying to do that. So the thing that I've been closely sort of paying attention to and is guiding a lot of our strategy is this myth or this idea that you own the consumer, and every brand, every retailer is trying to own the consumer. Everybody's trying to build a moat around their business to say this is protected. Somebody comes in, they're going to stay there, and they don't. People are normal. They're going all over the place. And so how do you sort of bridge the gap between retailer to brand to platform? I think if the platforms don't allow inventory to show up and show locally where you can also buy it and make that easier for the consumer to find it locally, they're going to have a limitation in their growth. And I think as a retailer, that's, we have to figure out how to leverage the strength of the platforms as well. So those are the things that we're considering. And actually, we're partnering with a lot of our key brands to look at deeper integrations to tie back and forth with them. I mean, my optimistic goal is that we could actually sort of like keep products off of some of the platforms so that specialty retail could stay special in terms of products that we carry. A lot of stuff that we sell can be found anywhere, which is challenging, right? And so those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I know you guys have obviously worked with like the shoes you're wearing. Those are Karu shoes that were made using scans from your stores and are unique to Fleet Feet stores. You can't find those anywhere else. And Similarly, I know in the audience we have JD, and there I know when you walk into a JD store, you see a lot of only at JD. So they're really working with this also product segmentation.
I think, yeah, that's a great point, right? Like every retailer, every brand is trying to find ways to differentiate themselves. I like to talk about distinction, right? We're trying to be, we have points of distinction. And leveraging the power of the Volumental system's actually been a point of distinction for the brand now, for Fleet Feet. And one of the ways that we've actually leveraged the data is that we built this shoe. We partner with a brand called Carhu. Fleet Feet has the exclusive distribution rights for the running shoes of the Carhu brand in the US. And we actually shared the first 700,000 foot scans that we got, that data, with that brand, and they built a custom foot last for the Fleet Feet consumer, and it's been getting pretty powerful reviews. And you can only find that at Fleet Feet. So I think there are ways, where you take your distinctive brand assets and you can leverage them. But you have to, really think through how you can do that.
It's interesting what options you have when you can't differentiate like that. I think there's an interesting case study in consumer electronics where people would go into a Best Buy, they would do all the research, they would touch and feel the product, and then they would go and buy it on Amazon, right? And Best Buy was starting to do this as a result. We see the economics now changing. So Samsung, when it spends $4 billion developing a new phone, they don't necessarily want it only to be featured on Amazon, right next to a toaster and a pair of socks. They do need Best Buy to showcase the product and brand it. So they're paying Best Buy to feature the product a lot more than they used to in the past. We see that in countries outside of the US in many CPG categories, that the CPG makers, right, the manufacturers, would pay the department stores, would pay the supermarkets to feature the products, right, because they need it for branding. So now the economics of those retailers are, you could argue, are undifferentiated retailers, right? The same products can be found for less on Amazon. They're starting to have serious cash flows coming in from the manufacturers because they want to serve the function of featuring the product and creating the brand experience.
Sure. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that consumers might find more helpful than creepy, but it's interesting, definitely something that I as a consumer wouldn't think about when I'm walking around the store. But really powerful to make sure you get in front of the right eyes.
Yeah, right. It's okay if you don't buy here. We get paid by the manufacturer.
Yeah, it's an interesting step. So then one of the other questions was, under what circumstances would an omni-channel approach prove ineffective? And what pitfalls? I mean, obviously, omnichannel is a buzzword that has been a buzzword for a while now. So what pitfalls could people fall into, and how do you avoid those?
I'll go first here, and I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. One of the things that you can do wrong is if you show the customer your org chart. So if there's differences that exist within your organization, silos that are built up where marketing is not talking to e-com, it's not talking to store, and you have that type of disconnect where you can't return something that you bought online in store, or you get an email that does not necessarily have a call to action, more of a dead end, as Jason said earlier. So I think that's one area they can definitely break down. And then if those channels are not up to speed based on what the 2020s are going to require a retailer to do, then you can fail miserably. And we've seen over the past year some major retailers basically take a whiff during the most important times of the year and not have their online sales open, not have stores talking to their online counterparts in a way that created that delightful experience for a customer and basically delivered them what they were there to do in the first place. So if you don't have channels with a cohesive story, not only from a brand perspective, but from an operational perspective, then you're setting yourself up for trouble.
One of the things I work on is trying to get brands towards this omnichannel goal, and the phrase I often hear is, "But we've always done it this way." It's the most dangerous phrase out there, and it normally comes from the technology department about a system that they don't want to throw out because they've invested millions of dollars over 10 years. But you have to be brave. You have to potentially throw out your whole technology stack and start again. And yeah, I agree about making sure you've got a full view of the customer as well.
Yeah, I'll go back to the anthropology story I told in the beginning. So I try to keep things pretty simple. So I talk about dead ends, but dead ends are very simple. They just prevent customers from buying stuff, right? You hit a service dead end in retail, I'm out, I'm not gonna buy anything. I hit a dead end because I got an email from a retailer and you can't click on the product to explore it or view anything more, I'm out. And so the story I told, actually, the retailer I ended up going to, they just went out of business last month. And I think their dead end wasn't, it was a little more insidious. It wasn't a service dead end, they nailed it. It was the fact that I only thought about them when I needed a last minute gift for my wife, right? And they had no way of keeping in touch with me and I had no way of sort of knowing what was new there. And so that was a different type of dead end, right? It's a harder one to track. And so I think I'll tell a story. Last year, we tried to launch buy online, pick up in store. Okay, we have 176 retail locations, and actually 100 of those locations are active fulfillment centers for our brand. So we actually fulfill all of our online orders. Our average ship time is 1.5 days. It's really fantastic. But doing something in store where customers their expectations, we call it the Amazon effect, and that hits in a variety of ways. Their expectations are, this is gonna work, right? And so if they click on something, they're gonna come in and get it. And our retailers did a pretty good job, but what we found is with our current technology in place, we couldn't quite do it the way we needed to from a service and experience perspective. And so we ran a test in 20 stores for about a couple months. It just didn't work and I killed it. And so you look at this last holiday season and buy online, pick up in stores really you see tons of articles about, hey, this is how retailers are gonna be able to compete is with buy online, pick up in store. And I look at our brand and I realize, for us, it's going to be more probably a reserve online pickup in store because when you look at payment, I know I think we're going to talk about payments a little bit later too. It's a pain in the butt to take out your wallet and use your credit card to buy something online. Now think about that. Think about how amazing the world is right now where you go to Amazon, it's one click to buy something, but most retail sites are still sort of complicated in that regard. And so we want to eliminate that and just make it simple for a consumer to be able to click, put their name in, and reserve it to come in store to pick it up. And that's where we're headed, I think.
Just an interesting story. A couple of years ago, we had a big debate between Target and another major retailer, to remain nameless, about curbside pickup. It was just when it was starting. So you can order online and you can pick up in the store, but you don't have to go in the store. They bring it to the sidewalk and you're driving by, you're picking it up. And the other retailer, let's call them retailer B, were saying that there's no way they're going to launch something like that. Because if you're not walking into the store, they don't have an opportunity to cross-sell anything to you or to upsell to you or to do any branding. And therefore, they're not interested in this visit. And Target said, look, the economics are not that attractive, but our customers want this. So we will provide it, and if you want this, you can come in and pick up curbside. Fast forward to today, Target has been doing this, and this nameless retailer B, this. And the reason is exactly the stats that you quoted when in the outset, the recent Harvard Business Review study that shows that folks that buy from you Omni-Channel, even if a single visit might not be that profitable because you pick up curbside and then don't buy anything else, overall, these are your most loyal customers and they spend more with you per year. They are your highest lifetime value customers. So you better listen to them and meet them where they are, even if on a point solution individual trip, the economics are not that attractive.
I think that's a super good point. I mean, that's what it boils down to, right? It's really putting the customer in focus and making sure if you're not providing the best service and product, then you're not going to be able to succeed in the longer run. So time always flies a lot faster than one wants to. We do still have 20 minutes, but I want to make sure we also get some time for questions. So I have several more questions if people here don't have questions, but I wanted to close with a question for all of you, which is, who do you think will be the dominant retailers and innovators in 10 years from now in the retail industry? And do you think any of them exist today? I guess is even a follow-up question.
We say there's no...
Just an easy little one at the end there.
It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So I'll turn this over to you guys first.
I can't tell you. First of all, I'd say they probably don't exist. When you think of the companies that are part of our lives every day now that weren't around 10 to 15 years ago, there's just so many of them. Whether it's Pinterest, Instagram, just to name a few, Uber, Waze. These are things that have become part of our lives that really emerged onto the scene relatively quickly from a consumer perspective. So I'd be surprised if the quintessential retailer of tomorrow even exists today. But I think if the retailer is solving for, like we said before, if they've got a brand that makes people feel good, if they've on-trend merchandise that solves a customer's need, and they have an experience that allows people to get in and out and transact quickly, whatever technology enables any of those three pillars, then I think you're setting yourselves up for success. So my short answer is I have no idea who that retailer is going to be, but one of those three things will drive their success.
I also don't have an answer. I mean, Fleet Feet, obviously. But I think any company that can break down the silos that exist in the organization to allow them to sort of meet the consumer, like to make sense and be relevant to the consumer going forward, they're going to win. And there's sometimes understanding just the financials that go into whether you're launching e-com or what the in-store piece is, you're in malls, wherever you are, and trying to tie all these things together and understanding where some areas are just plain investments. I mean, you go visit some of the retail in New York, and I look around and I'm like, this is not profitable retail. I can see it. But it's a marketing extension of that brand now, which is an inverted way. I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were trying to figure out how to make websites sticky. Now we're trying to figure out how to make stores sticky and kind of improve and grow brand. And so I do think you know, you have to bend reality a little bit for a lot of these organizations that currently exist. And so back to Stephen's point, I think you have to, it might not exist yet because a new company, a startup might figure out how to live in a different way than what currently exists. But if companies can figure out how to break down those silos and work seamlessly across, I think they can get it right. But it has to start and end with the consumer. Amazon does a really great job with that. Their motto is day one. It's embarrassing to me, and it makes me feel really frustrated to think that a big company like Amazon is more interested in serving the consumer than we are as a specialty retailer. And it's something I keep in mind all the time. That's what we're up against if we want to win, is that we have to have that same mindset.
One brand that's really stood out to me lately is Todd Snyder, which is a men's brand. They have a nice website. It's built, it's very fast. It's got lots of great product photography, good copywriting. It changes every day. There's new arrivals, interesting content. If I think about the last thing I bought online, it was with Todd Snyder. One of the reasons I liked it was because I'm a regular customer. It recognizes me. It puts products it thinks I'm going to like up front. When I went to check out, I put my email address in, one click, and I'd bought the product. And I think about the last time I went to a store visit, it was also Todd Snyder. Their store in Madison Park has a barber shop, a cafe, very friendly, knowledgeable, well-trained staff. It's a fun experience to be there. I don't think they're going to take over the world, but I think that's a really good example of a brand that's got it right on many levels.
I think there's probably three key ingredients along the lines of some of the points that were made before. The first one is you got to get the last mile figured out. And I think probably Amazon is on the cutting edge, be able to make the last mile network economics work, and also as we move gradually into hopefully autonomous vehicles, be able to figure out the last 10 meters, right? You know, how is it going to get into your home? I think here Amazon is on the cutting edge. We want to combine it with a company that is excellent at customer experience, you know, knowing what to put next in front of you. And here I think that probably companies like Facebook, even though they get criticized for the kind of data collection that they do, they're super effective at, from thousands of posts from your friends and the brands that you follow at each moment that you log into Facebook, to know what to put in front of you so that you're going to spend hours with them every single day. I think that's a critical skill to customer centricity. And then the third ingredient is around your supply chain, right? It's got to be completely seamless. You got to have system-wide view into inventory in real time. It's updated with very few errors to be able to deliver on the Omni-Channel promise.
Yeah, I heard great questions and great answers coming through here. So with that in mind, are there any questions in the audience?
Thanks, gentlemen. I'm Megan Kessler. I'm with the e-tail conferences. So my question is for Jason specifically. You mentioned that you were using the technology to build custom shoes and you built a custom product. are you surfacing that product to your customers because you have their data about their feet?
That's a good question.
Specific customers, excuse me.
Yeah, no, because what's happened is like it's on a last, right? So we use a 700,000 scan to build a last, because essentially every footwear brand, every shoe that you buy is built off of a certain last, right? And that last sort of changes by the different sizes of the shoe chain. So this is not hyper-personalized to each person's foot yet, and that's where we're going, actually. We're working on Monumental right now in a variety of ways where we can actually, hoping that in the coming year, we'll be able to produce 3D printed customized insoles for shoes, and there's a lot of major footwear brands that are starting to, obviously in 3D printing, that's already been out there for a little while. So we're going to be that's what we're going to be figuring out, is how do we get you, right, 14% of the population to, their 2 different feet are 2 different sizes, right? And so there's a lot of things that right now, we could solve for that nobody's been able to solve for on the personalization front. And then it'll be very personalized to the consumer, and we will be servicing those.
Hi Jason, this is a question for you as well. How far do you think it's going to take for all shoes to be fully custom, and not just, of course, the insole is the next step, and hopefully soon, but I wanted to hear your
Well, I'm assuming a lot of people in this room have some experience with technology, and so it's going to take longer than people think, and maybe shorter than a lot of people also think. So that's a non-answer, by the way. I will say the partners that we've had in this venture on trying to figure out custom footwear and 3D printed footwear, we're way past where we thought. It's taking a lot longer than people anticipated. There's a lot of issues. Even when it comes to 3D printing, right, getting the compounds correct so that things will sort of stick and adhere, there's a lot of challenges that the brands are facing in manufacturing footwear that are out there. And so until those are sort of solved and figured out, I think it's going to take a little while. So I think we're still a couple years out before you really start to see it in mass production.
Hello there, my name is Moshe Lundstrom. This is more just a talking point for everyone that I'd be interested if anyone has some thoughts on. So when it comes to the Omni-Channel UX user experience, I think a lot about how oftentimes when you make a purchase online, you view things, there's a whole bunch of different technologies that brands are employing, from video to really up close, high definition photography. But I'm sure we've all experienced when you order something and you receive it, and it's not quite as good as you thought it would be. It doesn't look as good. I kind of equate it to Instagram. Most people look better on their Instagram than they do in real life, right? So I was wondering if you have any thoughts about how you think technology is going to maybe bridge that gap and make that user experience perhaps more delightful, and that when customers receive something, they actually find it better than what they thought. It exceeds their expectations as opposed to lets them down a little bit.
I will say that the brands we work with, good photography, good video, good copywriting are the number one reason why they don't get so many returns. I also think product reviews really help. I mean, I was really against product reviews a few years ago. Everyone was like, well, for the luxury brands I work with, they're like, oh, you could never have people talking about our products. But I think people realize now that it's really valuable to get other input and validation on certain products from other customers that have already bought those things. So that definitely helps. Also, the product has to be nice. That's actually the trouble with a lot of things people buy on Instagram. I bought a phone holder for my car. Looked amazing in the Instagram video. I'm the sucker that bought 2 of them, and garbage. Yeah.
I think that's a great point, and I think we could probably start our own apparel retailer today and be up and running on Monday. We might not have a lot of inventory, but it's that easy to get the infrastructure up and running with, snazzy video and pictures. But I think you nailed it. It really comes down to having that history of customers vouching for you and building that equity in the traditional ways so that you can align the expectations of a marketing experience with the actual physical experience. So I think you do have to turn to the community and have them validate that the product lives up to the hype, so to speak.
Hello, my name is Johan. I work for Brooks Brothers. I'm curious about how the store environment will look in the future with Omnichannel. I see like Bonobos is a quite interesting store model. You see a lot of retailers like Brooks Brothers itself has a lot of very big and quite old stores. And how do you see that changing in the new sort of more digital age?
So at Fleafy, we've been dabbling this a little bit. We just opened up a new store in Austin, Texas, where it's essentially a footwear-only store. We have our Volumental foot scanner in there, and we're able to carry twice the amount of footwear styles in that location versus like a typical location. And so, but they also have less inventory. We're leveraging, we leverage our website to actually fulfill special orders or save the sale moments with the consumer. And so it's a smaller footprint store, and we're kind of trying to figure out that's, one of the ways of the future. I also have, we also look at, do stores actually at some point need to get a little bit bigger? Because at the end of the day, consumers want stuff today. And so, there is a shakeout here that needs to happen to see what really is going to happen. I think retailers get excited about some ideas where maybe you can reduce inventory costs, reduce rent structures. Everybody's a little bit fearful. They're, where's the confidence to invest in a bigger retail location if you're, and it depends on who you are as a retailer, right? But you've seen, Target's opening smaller footprint stores, right? There's a lot of things that are happening out there that are different. So I don't really have a perfect answer, but I think it just requires a lot of trial and error to get it right.
I will add to that, and I think that a store is an opportunity to get your brand values across. It's a place to be a platform for your brand, to talk about design, craftsmanship, to show off product, and to offer a stimulating experience to someone that comes in and wants to know about Brooks Brothers, as well as buy the basics and buy products. You should be showing off new things that are coming, exclusive things to the store, that sort of thing.
I think when we look at the whole supply chain, it really boils down to 3 simple functions, and the risk of oversimplifying. Somebody needs to make the product, somebody needs to educate you about it, and education could be functional, but it can also be emotional, which is really, and then somebody needs to get the product to you, right? So there's these 3 functions, and then for each product, you kind of want to optimize who provides these functions. So you could argue, hey, if what you're making is a low consideration, let's say CPG item, then really there's no need for a store. You just get it from the maker to the hands of the consumer as efficiently as quickly as possible. Cut out all the interim steps. If it's a product that somebody needs education, either functional or emotional, then the store should be super clear about what that value add is and focus on that. And then if the store also feels that it needs to be the fulfillment center so people come and pick it up, great. But as many of these pure play online retailers show, the store doesn't necessarily have to have any fulfillment functions. Bonobos, Warby Parker, a bunch of others recently, Blue Nile in Diamonds. The store is for education. The delivery is done through the online channel. Really, you cannot. They don't carry any inventory. So being super meticulous about who fulfills which function from a customer-centric perspective, I think it's probably an effective way to approach it.
Thank you. So this has been a really exciting conversation. I hope you guys have found it inspiring and learned something today. We would be happy to continue the conversation with everyone up here and in the audience, but I understand also that people have places to go. So feel free to approach anyone from Monumental if you'd like to keep talking about how we work with, how we're working with this, but also, of course, feel free to reach out to the panelists, I'm sure. Thank you so much for being with us today. And yeah, let's wrap it up there.